Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barik ala Sayyidina Maulana Muhammadin wa ali wa sahbihi ajma'een. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Very good to have you all in our program, Influential Muslim Personalities. Today I am especially excited to have with us Dr. Tarek Elgawhary. Excited because Dr. Tarek has been a guest at Al-Huda Mosque. He was one of our Friday khatibs, so he's somebody who is familiar with the Kenyan scene, with the Nairobi scene. Dr. Tarek, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Once again, welcome to the program. Very nice to have you on. We're very happy, very excited, inshallah. May Allah facilitate for us a good discussion today.
A pleasure to be with you.
Viewers, as a way of introduction, Dr. Tarek Elgawhary is a teacher, writer, and scholar of comparative religions and Islamic studies. He is the founder of the Making Sense of Islam platform. I believe this is a podcast dedicated to developing tools to help Muslims connect and be present with their beliefs and daily practices. Dr. Tarek currently serves as the General Director of the Royal Al-Bayt Institute for Islamic Thought in Amman. He is professor of Shafi Fiqh at the Wise University, the founder of Bayt al-Fatwa, and the scholar in residence of the Islamic Community Center of Potomac. In these various capacities, he teaches, lectures, and writes about normative Sunni Islam and how it is expressed and practiced in the modern world. Dr. Tarek's educational background is a bit unorthodox and eclectic. He spent his Western education in the space of comparative religions, having earned a BA in comparative religions with the focus on Jewish studies and an MA in a specialized program focusing on Islam and Hinduism, both from the George Washington University. So indeed, an eclectic mix, mashallah. Dr. Tarek's graduate studies culminated with his PhD from Princeton University in Islamic law. Dr. Tarek was also trained at the al-Azhar Seminary in Cairo, Egypt, between 2003 and 2007, where he studied and was licensed in the traditional Islamic sciences. So, alhamdulillah, a lot to unpack here, and inshallah, time permitting, we will go in, we'll take a deep dive in as much as we can with all the various backgrounds, all the various expertise of Dr. Tarek. But as is traditional in our program, Dr. Tarek, I would request you to give us a small background about your early life, about your early childhood, where you were born, and your upbringing, the household that you were brought up in.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Thank you for this very wonderful and gracious invitation. Always an honor to be with you and to be with our brothers and sisters, our Kenyan brothers and sisters, whom we are fond of and love very much. I was born in Cairo, Egypt in 1979, but my parents had already immigrated to the United States. So I was actually born a U.S. citizen abroad, back to join with my father. And I grew up in the state of Maryland, which borders the capital of the United States, Washington, D.C. And all of my formative years and all of my formal education were in the United States, with the exception that every summer we would travel back to Egypt. So I grew up spending at least 2 or 3 months every single year in Egypt. And then when we got older, we would spend the winter break and the summer break also in between Egypt and Jeddah. Actually, my mother's a Saudi Egyptian, and my father's Egyptian. So I have family in Saudi, and my mother's family goes back to one of the Zemzem families, one of the families that gave siqaya, gave water to the pilgrims, so an ancient family in Mecca. And we had a normal, what I would say, a normal conservative Islamic upbringing. We were taught to pray and to fast and to read the Quran and to learn the Arabic language, and fasted in Ramadan, and we prayed at home together, and when we were out we prayed when we needed to pray. And my parents taught us the basics of the religion, of the deen, and it was a an Egyptian Islam. And what I mean by that, an Egyptian Islam is an Islam that is infused with tasawwuf, infused with mahabba, with love, infused with barakah, infused with kindness, infused with tolerance, and also grounded in an understanding because of the importance of al-Azhar. My grandfather, my father's father was an Azhari, and there was always this, well, let's look into it, let's read, let's understand, let's make sense of it. So it was an approach that was undergirded by this scholarly approach, if you will. But my parents were not trained formally. But that's sort of how I grew up. And I was always inclined to intellectual matters, philosophy and literature and religion. So I think I just kind of carried that on by the time I went to college.
You talk about all the, mashallah, the beautiful virtues, the beautiful qualities, which are so quintessentially Islamic of praying together, fasting, all the other aspects that define that would define a typical Islamic household. You were growing up in the U.S. Was there a bit of an anomaly when you were at home and when you are outside with your friends and in the general environment outside there?
I mean, I guess yes. Maybe I hesitate because I don't know any other way. I mean, that's how I grew up. But yeah, I mean, I suppose there is this dichotomy. But the time and the age that I grew up in the United States, it was very tolerant. So even though I was a very small minority, I never was, persecuted because of my religion or attacked or anything like that. I mean, it was quite the opposite. I had always the opportunity to pray at school, and if it was a time of Ramadan, to be exempt from, attending lunch and things like that. So it was a tolerant and accepting America. Maybe, unfortunately, that is changing now to the worst, but it was a tolerant and accepting America. But yes, there was always this dichotomy because up until I got to college, all my classmates were non-Muslim. So there was always this need to kind of articulate and explain, from your name and to why you don't eat certain foods and why you don't do certain activities, things like that. So I guess I grew up in the interfaith space in the sense that you're always trying to explain. And when you try to explain something, you need to find a reference point for the person in front of you. So that means that you need to know about the other person. And I think that sort of I grew up that way. My mind is formatted that way. So I'm always looking for, well, what would that person what's a reference that person would understand and be like, oh, so this is like such and such that you're familiar with, and this is the way I do it, such and such. So yeah, I grew up like that, but I never saw it as a negative or as a challenge. I assumed that was what life was like.
So this is, I mean, the American setup very cosmopolitan. You have different faith traditions. You have different people from all sorts of backgrounds. Is that also probably what influenced you to then go into comparative religious studies as well? Is that what gave you the pathway to your studies?
Perhaps that was part of it. A larger part is that when I was a junior in high school, we had to take a special year-long course on Western philosophy and literature. And this was a very intense, it was called the humanities course. And it was a very intense reading of, and I was just a teenager at the time, but reading of Plato, Aristotle, and the formation and the basis of Western thought and civilization, and then coupled with that, paired with that is the literature, all the the great work, starting with Homer, all the way through. And I think it was in that experience, that deep experience of understanding the intellectual underpinnings of Western, or what is claimed to be the intellectual underpinnings of Western civilization, that again, that comparative habit kicked in. So I'm always looking, well, what's the equivalent for Muslims? What is the equivalent for the Muslim world in Islam? And that caused me to read more on my own about my own religion, about Islam, and to learn more. And I think that sort of, by the time I got to college, I was sort of full with that, that quest. So I think that, Allahu Alam, but maybe I just, I wanted to do more. And then the next biggest milestone that kind of solidified that for me is when I got to college. Unbeknownst to me, there was this very special, figure, may Allah Ta'ala preserve him, was Sayyid Hussein Nasr, who I had never heard his name before, but he was a professor. And when I was a sophomore, I took Intro to Islam, or Islam 101, I think it was called. And I had never seen somebody this intelligent speak about Islam and the Islamic intellectual history. And I was hooked. At that point, I was like, oh, this is what I've been looking for. This is how I can learn my religion. And I decided that that's what I wanted to do. That's what I wanted to focus on.
It's interesting you talk about the humanities because there's so many contemporary Islamic scholars, especially in the West, who decry a lack of humanities or an inclination for Muslim students towards the humanities. You have so many Muslims. I mean, and that's I don't think it would be wrong of me to say that the general trend is to go towards the STEM aspect of studies. People would like to be doctors and engineers. It carries status. It is what is required, I guess. It's what can give you a good life. They decry, and they've been very well-known Islamic scholars, including Sheikh Hamza Yusuf. They decry the lack of humanities because humanities is something that gives you. It sort of gives you an insight into how you can unravel, how you can direct your thinking. Do you think then this was a good launching pad for you? Was it? Did you see the benefits then of this course that you did, or meeting up with Sheikh Nasser as you mentioned?
Of course, I mean, those who do not study the humanities, I think, would live a miserable life. I mean, the humanities or the liberal arts are called liberal arts because they are worthy of a free person to study. It's worthy of your time. If you're a free person, which alhamdulillah we all are, and it's worthy, you have the benefit of learning these subjects and expanding your mind and your creativity. Imam al-Ghazali says that a mujtahid's ijtihad is only as good as their creativity. So there are two different things. There are those that study the Sharia sciences. So let's address that first. I mean, if you're a talib ilm and you go to study the Sharia sciences and you think for some reason that, only studying the traditional Islamic sciences is important and studying other forms of the humanities or literature of your own country, if you're not an Arab, you're greatly mistaken. Imam Shafi'i had memorized the whole diwan of the Hudayli poets. It says this volume that you see right back here. The whole Hudayli poetry, and al-Asma'i, one of the great linguists, sat with Imam Shafi'i to hear how the proper poetry is supposed to sound. They said if Imam Shafi'i would to write a book on grammar, it would have changed the study of grammar the way that his book, the Risala, changed the study of usul al-fiqh. So the ulama of the past, of the Salaf, these great luminary, this is just a few examples, they were very, very well trained in language and what we call today the humanity and literature, history, etc. You can't be a faqih if you don't know history. You can't be a historian if you don't know fiqh. That was one of the lines we were always taught. So if you're a Sharia student, it's essential that you know these subjects. Now, if you're just an average Muslim and you're not wanting to go into the Shia science, which is fine. You don't have to go into the Shia sciences. I mean, only a subset of people should do that. And if you said you want to go into the STEM or STEAM, sometimes they add that. That's fine, but you can't really be a successfully well-rounded person also if you don't know the humanities, if you don't know literature, if you don't know philosophy, if you don't know history, so that you can be aware of where we have come from, where we are now, and where we need to go. So yeah, I think it's a tremendous crime that students are being robbed of these subjects and people are feeling that it's not important.
So for the young viewers who would be tuning in, one thing that comes to mind is then they would say, all right, fair enough, we would go into the humanities. This is something that we can explore. What after that? Because it's not perceived as something that can give you a living. How would you address that?
Not everything that you study you need to work with. Sometimes you need to know things because you need to use it. So, you're not earning a living because you're praying 5 times a day, but as a Muslim, you have to learn how to pray 5 times a day because that's what it means to be. One of the things it means to be a Muslim is to pray. You're not earning money by reading the Quran. but you need to learn how to read the Quran because this is our revelation, etc., etc., etc. I mean, that premise is just false. Not everything that you're going to study is something that you're actually going to then turn into a craft or a trade. But the understanding how to think, not just spitting out and regurgitating facts, but understanding how to think, how to weigh evidence, how to think via first principles is essential for anybody in any field. So the humanities teaches you how to think and explores all of those nuances, and that's why it's essential.
Coming to your podcast, before we go down to the other your other current undertakings, making sense of Islam. Could you tell us what this is about?
Well, I was just looking for a name for my platform.
Mashallah, it's a very succinct and very appropriate name, I must add.
So I was just trying to think largely for a non-Arabic Western audience. That's what was in mind. I was like, well, what am I all about? What am I trying to do? And I said, I'm just trying to make sense of Islam, which is essentially how I understand, what the mujtahid does. The mujtahid is trying to, in a very sophisticated, mechanical way, but they're trying to make sense of Islam like right now. So there's the theoretical study of Islam, and then there is how we apply Islam in our day-to-day situation. So my situation as an American Muslim is very different than your situation as a Kenyan Muslim. There are some overlaps, but there are a lot of differences. So knowing the context is important. And I realized all of these years by kind of comparing and contrasting and helping to link, what I'm trying to teach people based on something that they have, that they're familiar with, I realized that that's sort of the right kind of phrase. It's just making sense of Islam. So I just called it that. And it's a platform by, anything that I write or anything that I publish or the podcast or the interviews, sort of just, my platform is just making sense of Islam.
I'm intrigued. How has it been received by non-Muslims? Do you have a way of knowing the impact that it is having on non-Muslims? Are they curious about Islam? Are there certain events that might have sort of fueled this curiosity?
I can't give you about one specific, piece of content that I have, but in general, when I've interacted or I've been asked to speak to a non-Muslim audience or we're interacting on a certain topic, I do find that the way I talk about Islam and teach about Islam in the modern world resonates with people. And they are not used to somebody like me addressing some of the topics that I address. And I think that that's where there is a lot more interest. And again, this is not about conversion. This is another problem that Muslims are obsessed with conversion, and they think that da'wah is missionary conversion activity. That's a Christian thing. That's not our thing. And I'm very, very offended when people say that Islam is a missionary religion. I think it's a completely false statement. And when Muslims themselves think that that's what da'wah is, it's a complete, miscommunication, misunderstanding. Dawah is that we just be the best versions of ourselves. And if somebody asks us about what we believe in, we have an obligation to be honest and transparent. But at the end of the day, Allah Ta'ala is the one who guides. And we have no power to guide anybody, but we have the power and the ability to present. So it's not about conversion, but for me, it's about engagement. I want to engage with people, and I want people to understand that Islam is a very sophisticated system of belief. We have a set of first principles. We have a way of thinking, and there are many things that way of thinking has to offer current problems that you can benefit from as a non-Muslim without being a Muslim. So it's not about accepting Islam. It's not black or white. But as a member of society, I want my society to benefit. And if I have something to offer my society, I want to offer it, and I want them to benefit. Just like if they have something to offer that I can benefit from, me, my family, my community, ahlan wa sahlan, I'll take it and I'll accept it. So for me, it's about engagement. It's not about conversion at all. I don't care about that at all. It's about engagement.
But wouldn't a natural step from engagement be then for somebody to have an inclination to be sort of pulled, their heartstrings are pulled towards this deen, and they come into the deen? Wouldn't that be the ultimate goal then, wouldn't you say?
No, لا تهدي من أحببت ولكن الله يهدي من يشاء. Guidance only belongs to Allah Ta'ala. For me, for any microsecond to think that I would have some influence on that would be to assume something that Allah Ta'ala has not given me. But I want people to be the best versions of themselves. I want people to be happy. I want people to be content. I want people to celebrate life. I want people to work with their neighbors. If they decide to become a Muslim, great. You're welcome in our community. If they don't decide to be وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ, stake in that. But I need to present. I mean, here I'm obviously speaking as a minority because when I'm right now, as we're recording, I'm in Egypt, so the context here is very. I don't have to. This is a different context. But when I'm in America, my issue is I want people to understand that Islam has something to contribute to the wider society and to the problems and the issues that are facing us all. And based on that, my interest is that type of engagement. It's not with this sort of, I have another intention that I want them to convert because I have no control into that. So, وَلَا إِكْرَاهَ فِي الدِّينِ, as the Quran teaches, there's no compulsion in religion. So that's something that has to come. If it comes at all, it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and it's a gift.
If I could connect that then to something that we are facing now, no, this is not just localized to the West. I think this is a global issue, which is the deliberate misrepresentation of Islam. People who are trying to sort of deliberately undercut the deen, trying to represent it in something which it is not. Would you be then involved in correcting such misconceptions? Obviously, you would have to play a very significant role given your background. You would be extremely qualified for that. How would you approach that phenomenon?
Well, I mean, the problem with the misconception of Islam is that there has been a systematic misconception of Islam since like the 10th century. So this is a problem that's beyond me and you, and I don't think we will ever erase it.
But isn't it something that's being really projected and being forcefully sort of spread?
This has all been documented. I mean, it's not a secret. I mean, from before the time of the Crusades, there's been this from Europe on purposeful, targeted, direct misinformation campaign about Islam through false translations and referring to the Prophet's name as Muhammad. And then the false prophet that the Europeans claim the Freemasons or the Knights Templar worship was Baphomet. I mean, it's not a coincidence that they both sound the same. I mean, there's all this dark stuff. I don't like to talk about it, but yeah, it exists. And it exists in different ways, in different waves, and different themes. So that's sort of the early type. And then the whole, from the beginning, the end of the 1700s onwards, this new field of Orientalism, which was really an extension of the colonial enterprise, because these early Orientalists were intelligence agents providing intelligence for their governments, seeing how they can manage and subjugate these people. And then from that came the study of Orientalism. I mean, when I was at Princeton, that was the type of tradition that I was introduced to. So that's another type of. There's a lot of misinformation when it comes to that. It's much more sophisticated than the stuff in the Middle Ages. So anyway, I mean, we can sit here and complain until we're blue in the face, but that's not the point. The point is that what do? Well, what we need to do is we need to present ourselves as the right Islam. I mean, that's the obligation that we have, so that we can pass Islam to our children the way it was given to us by our parents. And this goes all the way. This is what Islam is. The Prophet ﷺ and the early generation passed this on to the generation after them, unadulterated, and that's what we have to do. That's an obligation. So what we can control is we can control ourselves being the best version of ourselves. The problem is we are plagued in our own community with this huge amount of ignorance. So many Muslims are not helping this on this issue because they themselves are ignorant, and this causes a reduction in the intellectual capacity of the ummah. So the ummah just becomes dumber and dumber and dumber because we've made Islam dumb. We've made Islam very stupid and futile, and it's quantifiable. How long is your beard? How short is your throat? These are all things that you quantify. Now, that's not how the Prophet ﷺ taught the Sahaba. It wasn't about quantity, it was about equality. اتق الله حيثما كنت. Be mindful of Allah wherever you are. إن الله كتب الإحسان على كل شيء. Allah has prescribed perfection, excellence on everything. That's our deen. I'm not saying the quantifiable, I'm just using them as a silly example. I mean, everything is important if it's related to the Prophet ﷺ. So Islam, for Muslim, I'm not really concerned about the misinformation that non-Muslims have about Islam. I'm much more concerned about the misinformation that Muslims have about Islam. So we are now our worst enemy. Forget about, I can't put the blame on somebody else. If you see how some Muslims talk about Islam and how they've reduced Islam from quality to all of these quantifiable issues, it's almost like you can measure someone's faith. You can't measure someone's faith. Faith is something that's in the heart. The Prophet ﷺ, a man came back from battle, and it came to the Prophet ﷺ that he killed this man. And the man had said La ilaha illallah before he was struck. He was an enemy combatant. I mean, they were in fighting, And the Prophet ﷺ, you killed him? And he said La ilaha illallah. And the Sahabi's like, yeah, but he only said that so I wouldn't kill him. And the Prophet ﷺ kept repeating it. Ashaqaqta an qalbi, did you split open his heart? See, you killed him and he said La ilaha illallah. He kept repeating it. The Sahaba said, I was so humiliated. I wished that the earth would swallow me and I had not become Muslim until that. So all of this would be forgotten. I mean, what could be more serious than battle? Arm-to-arm conflict. Somebody who's openly your enemy, somebody who's openly preventing you. And then he says the kalima. And then that ensues, and look how the Prophet ﷺ acted. That's all quality, it's not quantity. Of course the man said it just so he wouldn't be killed, but that's not the point. The point is that we have principles. So unfortunately, we are the problem today, not this misinformation. And we have to educate our people.
So are you then involved in something that would sort of open up that vista, in the sense that working with the community, working with the Muslim community, is some of your work then focused towards that? To remove those misconceptions or those things that are internal problems, so to speak?
Yeah, some of my work is in the counter-radicalization space, which I know is like a dirty word for Muslims, but I mean, this is like us doing it for our own people, not like on behalf of like a government or like spying. That's not what I mean. But I mean all of these themes that are themes that lead people to extremism. The idea of takfir, the idea of al-wala wal-bara, the idea of not being able to coexist with my non-Muslim neighbor. I remember my first trip in Kenya, somebody asked me, I think I was in Mombasa, and somebody was asking me, can I eat from like the same dish as like my Christian neighbor? I was baffled. I mean, I said, the answer is they're your neighbor. Didn't the Prophet ﷺ advise us with our neighbor? Until the Prophet ﷺ said, Gabriel kept advising me to be good to my neighbor, to the point that I thought he was going to say the neighbor will inherit from you. And the Prophet ﷺ died, or we don't say he died, he transferred to al-Rafiq al-A'la sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and his shield was ransomed with a Jewish neighbor because he had taken food from that neighbor. And as a matter of fact, one of our teachers, Sayyid Ahmad ibn Siddiq al-Ghumari, he writes about his father, the famous Saint Muhammad Siddiq al-Ghumari, that he used to, when he died in Tangier, the Jews of Tangier were very sad because he used to always do business with them, because he said it was a sunnah to do business with the Jews because that's how the Prophet ﷺ lived in Medina. So when the lady asked me that question, I was in my mind, I'm like, this is what we've been reduced to? Like somebody would actually ask this question, like, can I eat with my neighbor who's not a Muslim? So, this is when I say counter-radicalization, these are the themes that can lead to extremism. And I'm very much involved, me and my colleagues, whether it be in Jordan or here in Egypt, very much involved in addressing these themes and trying to show people where they come from, where they originate from, and how they are not part of what I call normative Islam or usuli Islam.
How is this then, are you seeing a change of heart?
There's a famous line of poetry, لِكُلِّ دَاءٍ دَوَاءٌ يُسْتَطَبَّ بِهِ. Every disease has a medicine that can heal it. إِلَّا الْحَمَاقَ, except stupidity. آية من يداويها. It hasn't been able to find somebody who can heal it. So to be honest with you, it's a very depressing approach because, and I'm sorry to use these words, but when you find somebody who's that stupid, who actually believes that their neighbor is a kafir and therefore najis and takes things literally, if the person's mind is programmed to see things like that, there's very, very little hope. Because it's not a problem of the deen, it's a problem of the mentality. Going back to the liberal arts, why the liberal arts education is important. Because when you study the humanities, when you study literature, when you study history, when you study philosophy, you learn that there are ways that we communicate. And not everything is literal. There are many things that are metaphoric. And when you understand that and then you read the Quran, you can see it's as plain as the light of day that there are many verses in the Quran that are figurative, not literal. But for somebody who just completely literally sees everything is just literal and black and white, it's very, very hard to undo that because you have to reprogram their mind. That being said, the best hope that we have is we teach, it's like a train the trainer model. So like we teach the imams, we teach the mashayikh, those who have had the training or some of the training in the Sharia, to show them, be careful when you talk, be careful when you're in the mimbar, be careful when you have your dars, be careful in the halaqah, that you don't use certain words or you use certain words so that people don't take the wrong type of conclusion. So, we're going to work until there's no breath left, inshallah. The result, that belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Inshallah. And this is something that I can relate to in a very small way. Obviously, I'm not anywhere near what you're doing, Dr. Tarek, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala facilitate and open ways for you. But you have individuals, and this is something that really it boggles the mind. Somebody coming up to you asking you about very specific fiqh matters related to salah, for example, and but if you look into the background of that individual, they do not pray. Not even the 5. Forget about the 5 times. It's not even there's no effort to even pray a single prayer, a single salah in a day. But the person has got such in-depth questions, and you're wondering to yourself, what is the purpose of all of this? Are you trying to make an impression, or this is something that needs to be tasted. You go into salah. You get the taste of salah. This is something that you feel, something that is really beyond words, if I may say so. You've not done that, but here you are, splitting hairs about, what needs to be done, what doesn't need to be done, and you try to figure it out. It's a moment of scratching your head. Why is this person asking me this? When they themselves have not gone into this. This is something that I'm sure you're familiar with.
I think it's a hidden desire. It's a shahwa, and people like Imam al-Ghazali and the Ahya, they talk about some of these diseases of the heart. The desire to be known or to be famous, the desire to stir controversy. Sometimes people ask for the sake of asking, just because it's just sort of something popped in their mind, so they're gonna, it's like a social media thing. Like, I can just keep scrolling, so I can keep asking. But that's really not, as you mentioned something important. It's meant to be tasted. So Islam is an experience, and the people before us were much more interested in that experience and the journey that led to that experience. So I've experienced a lot of what you've mentioned as well.
And you talk about, social media. The people who interact on social media now, and people who have some certain voice and who have a certain qualification to be able to speak, they talk about individuals now. There's this term that I came across yesterday: the confident dumb. People who want to sound confident. They want to sound confident on social media. Like you said, they want to have a presence. It's because it's providing a platform for anyone and everyone. So you have this desire to make yourself known, and we are laughing about it, but sometimes it actually brings about harm. I think for the uninitiated individual who's online, who's looking at this, you can get influenced. There are individuals who come wearing a kufi, wearing a thobe, and they say all sorts of fantastic things But then it certainly has a negative effect on individuals who are watching, isn't it?
The point is fame. The point is not knowledge.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if I'm a social media person, the point is to put together content, to put it out there, to get people to interact, to grow, so that it can be monetized. It's just like kind of a cycle. So I'll say anything and everything. That's why we see a lot of these people. They flip flop all the time. Well, in their minds, they're not flip flopping. They're just chasing where the statistics are telling them is going to give them the fame. Whereas the perspective of the ulama, for example, is very different. Imam Malik, the famous story, Imam Malik was asked, I don't know, 40, 50, 70 questions, and he said like to 50, 60 of them, I don't know. Somebody asked me, he said, I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, so the alim's job is to convey knowledge, which is to the paradigm of how we think and how we interpret the Quran and Sunnah. It's not to always speak. Sometimes the right thing is not to speak at all. But if your only thing is social media, then if you stop speaking, you'll die. You'll lose that platform. So yes, its basic concept is incorrect.
Coming back to the kind of work that you do, Dr. Tariq, you are the general director of the Royal Al-Bayt Institute for Islamic Thought in Amman. Could you tell us a little more about that kind of work that you're involved with in that?
So the Muassasat Al-Bayt is sort of this, or Rabit, as we say in Jordan, is one of the older, more well-known, I guess you can say, Islamic think tanks or institutes in the Muslim world. It's been around for quite some time, alhamdulillah, and Allah Ta'ala bestowed upon me this honor of currently serving as its general director. And in the past, the organization, we have fellows, and then we convene the fellows every so often to talk about what we think are important and pressing issues facing the ummah. Other than that, sort of as the outward activity, for many years we were very much concerned. We still have this concern, but this was like one of the premier kind of projects that we had. Is we had a very large manuscript project to gather as many manuscripts and books as possible. And now, because of the leveraging our digital assets, we have a website that we run called QuranicThought.com, and we have nearly almost 1 million books of Islam for free, between printed and manuscript books. And every couple of years, we're able to acquire more and more of these digital books for free, alhamdulillah, and make them accessible to the ummah. So providing a space where
Are
you
these
can
books,
come and access.
if I may just jump in, are these books in Arabic or are they available in English as well?
We have a sizable English number of books. I want to say a couple 100,000, but the majority of them are the books of the Turath. So the books of the different Islamic sciences and the different Islamic sects. The vast majority of them are going to be in Arabic. I want to say we have some Persian books, but I think we've delayed putting them online, and we want to finish the Arabic books. But the vast majority are in Arabic. And then we're also interested in the space of education. So we recognize that there's an education. I also teach at the university, as you mentioned. So there's a lot of overlap in my duties between the institute and the university. And because of that, we're very concerned with education. This started with the Gaza war, and we realized that there would be a huge deficit in education amongst the children of Gaza specifically, and then the children of the Palestinian territories in general. So actually, we put together an app that offers the entire Palestinian curriculum for free for all the children. And as of, I think, last week, we're just a little bit over 2 million, I think, students that are using this app. Because, there are schools that are decimated and people are displaced from their homes. So that, I don't want to say little, like it to belittle it, but that was a kind of a pilot for a larger project. So we did that, and we continually run this program for Palestinian children. Then we realized, well, what the Palestinian children are experiencing, the millions of people are experiencing. There are millions of refugees and displaced people around the world. So we have put together learned from that project, and we've created a bigger project called al-Azhar, Al-Azhar, al-Azhar app, which you can download, which is free non-tracked. It's a free non-tracked app that provides so far English and Arabic education that's accredited from K through 12. And the idea is to deploy this app in different regions where there are refugees and displaced children. So the education project and the larger manuscript book project, these are kind of the two main concerns that we currently have at the Royal Al Bayt Institute. And we're also trying to do something in the space of AI, but it's just a little too rough for me to share with. But we're doing something in the space.
So is this all online via digital platforms, or do you have sort of people on the ground as well, teachers on the ground as well?
No, this is all digital. Yeah, this is
All
low cost, low budget, digital.
All right. Coming to you're also professor of Shafi Fiqh at the Wise University. What does that involve in your work?
We have an online BA program, Hanafi Fiqh and Shafi'i Fiqh. I oversee the entire program, but I also teach in the Shafi'i program, and the idea is to provide a accredited bachelor's level diploma, degree for English-speaking Muslims in the Islamic sciences. So, we have the university. We already have a program in Maliki Fiqh, Hanafi Fiqh, Shafi'i Fiqh in Arabic. So we said, well, why don't we also create an English program so we can teach and give people an actual degree in Sharia? So that's what we've been doing. I think we launched 3 years ago, and next year probably we'll finish the first cohort. We'll graduate, and then inshallah the cycle will continue. But it's also online. Again, leveraging the digital space online and providing the exact experience that you would have if you came to like al-Azhar or our university Wise and studied in Arabic. We're providing the same experience but in the English language.
In addition to your Western education, the background that you have, and it was very holistic, you also studied at al-Azhar for a good 4 years. Could you share with us your experience? I mean, what was the contrast like?
Yeah, it was magical. I mean, it was a magical experience. It was really very transformative because it's not just the subjects that you studied; it's the experience, the overall experience. Because
of being at al-Azhar.
Yeah, because you're kind of like in this sort of holistic other world. You're studying. I mean, I studied in the actual Azhar, so it's like a physical space that's been there for almost 1,000 years, over 1,000 years, sorry, and just to think about the walls and the columns and who's sat here and it's the same thing, for over a millennium of learning, and the type of instruction is very different than the type of instruction in the West. So it's very detail oriented. It's very thorough. It's very comparative. So even though I'm a Shafi'i, we would always, when we'd come to certain points, we would always bring the other opinions, the other madhab to debate. So when you debate something, it's a very, very different experience because then you're forced to articulate your own position and you might lose. So that type of back and forth, to see that type of tension back and forth in front of me and, argue and sometimes you have to argue the other madhab. So to also teach you to be flexible. It was a very, very transformative experience and a very spiritual experience, a very deep sort of, something, alhamdulillah, awoke inside me. And, I'm still there inside me. That's where I am. I'm still in the Azhar. That's where I am. I'm happy to remain there, inshallah.
Mashallah. Something that I want to sort of touch upon, and that is your focus on comparative religion as well. I mean, you have a background in Jewish studies. You studied Hinduism as well in comparative religion. What was that like, and what did you come away from it? Apart from the obviously the substantive matter in the course, what else did you come away from in learning about other religions?
Well, I believe that religion is one of the mightiest forces in the world, and it might not represent hard power, but it certainly represents soft power. And many, many people and many, many geopolitical issues can be understood if you understand the religious beliefs behind them, behind the people. And it baffles me that diplomats and governments don't get that. It's not enough just to study. When diplomats talk about history, they're talking about something that happened like 10 years ago. When I'm talking about history, I'm talking about human history, and it's very, very important to know, because in the Hindu world, this is an ancient religion, or Zoroastrian, this is an ancient religion. So several thousand years of belief and practice will certainly inform the people today much more than something that happened a few years ago. So I don't get that people don't get that. But anyway, so for me, it became a way of understanding the world. So I was blessed. I got to go to Japan for work, and my host, what would you like to do? They were expecting that I was going to say, oh, I want to go to this, site. I said, I want to go to as many temples and as many shrines as possible. And they thought like I mistyped the email. They're like, well, we don't understand. I said, any 5-10 minute free that we have in the schedule, if there's a shrine or a temple, I want you to take me there. I want to go to as many Shinto shrines and many Buddhist temples as possible. And alhamdulillah, I got to go to they told me that they took me to more temples and shrines than they had been to in their entire lives. Because for me, that's how I understand people. I can understand more about the culture and the people and the background and the history. So that's how my mind works. So for me, that was the most thing that I benefited from. And the other thing that you benefit is you realize the overwhelming amount of overlap between beliefs. Of course, there are some beliefs that are just not compatible with each other. But I would venture to say that the vast majority of religions at their core have an immense amount of shared beliefs and ethics. And that's very important, because part of what we need to do is we need to build bridges and try to be people of peace and call to peace and harmony. And the only way we can do that is if you understand sort of how the others work, and also how, when the others go wrong, sometimes we can be a mirror for them and help them see, well, that's not really, you're not living up to what your background is, etc. So those are kind of some of the things that I benefited from, I would say.
MashaAllah. As we conclude, Dr. Tariq, and I would love for this conversation to go on, so much that I'm learning in there. But as we conclude, the current situation that we find ourselves in, there is turmoil. It's a tempest. It's really confusion all around, like being in the middle of a storm, and especially for the young generation. It's a very difficult time as it is. They have internal fights or internal wars, if you may, that they're going through, fighting with themselves, looking for an identity. They have an identity, they have a Muslim identity as well, which is right now under a lot of pressure, which is being assailed from all directions. Things that are not really working out as they should be. With this in mind, and with this as a background, and with what you have, mashallah, done, the kind of work that you're doing as well, I would like you to give us, and take your time on this, give us a sort of an outlay as to how we can navigate through this. I mean, I know it's a very broad, very general question, but if you could focus it a bit and give us an outlay as to what we can do, and especially keeping in mind the younger generation.
So we'll only really be able to weather the storm when we find the calm that is within us. And finding the calm within us can only take place when we begin that journey of self-discovery and self-reflection and understanding who we really are and dedicating ourselves to being the best version of ourselves. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ referred to as al-Jihad al-Akbar, the greater jihad. The jihad, the struggle against yourself, that you have bad tendencies and good tendencies, and you have to say no to the bad tendencies and say yes to the good tendencies. And in that struggle back and forth, as we journey, then you become a polished individual, and then you start to become, you have uns, you have a relationship, closeness with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And no matter your outward circumstance, you'll always be able to find the calm inside. If you are not a calm person, if you're not a person at peace with yourself, you're never going to be able to react to these things. These things will only agitate you even more. And you might contribute to the problem and not contribute to the solution. A lot of these people that create these world conflicts, I don't want to give into anyone names, they're horrible people in their personal life. They're horrible human beings. And they're going to have to face Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yawm al-qiyamah and answer for the corruption and the death and destruction that they have done on earth. Don't think that this came out of a vacuum. If you just leave yourself, like this is the stuff that you create as a human being. So as a Muslim, we follow the Prophet ﷺ. So we can't do that. We have to dedicate ourselves to be the best version of ourselves. So the first thing I would say is that for young people and for old people, we need to really come back to that tradition, that spiritual tradition that we have in our deen, the tradition of ihsan, and to dedicate ourselves to that spiritual practice. There is no act of worship in the Quran that Allah Ta'ala tells us to engage in without limit except the remembrance of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu udhkuru Allaha dhikran kathira wasabbihuhu bukratan wa asila. Oh, you who believe, remember Allah night and day, all the time. All the other acts of worship are limited. إِنَّ الصَّلَاةَ كَانَتْ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ كِتَابًا مَوْقُوتًا. The prayer has been given to us as an allotted time. فَمَنْ شَهِدَ مِنْكُمُ الشَّهْرَ فَلْيَصُمْ. When you see the 9th lunar month, يعني Ramadan, fast. Al-Hajj أشهر معلومات. The Hajj are an allotted amount of months. Dhikrullah is not like that. It's something that is open-ended. You can't say he did too much dhikr. Man, there's no dhikran kathira, a lot of dhikr. And the Prophet ﷺ was described by Sayyidah Aisha, radiallahu anha, kana amalahu dima. His actions and his conduct was consistent. So here we are looking for not quantity, but consistency. Khairul a'mali andallahi adwamuha wa in qal. The best of actions with Allah Ta'ala are those that are consistent, even if they are few. So to take the spiritual practice seriously is you have to have a portion of dhikr during the day and during the night, a portion of reading the Quran, you have to focus on your prayer, etc., so that you can reform yourself, so that you can change yourself, so that you can experience something deeper within yourself. So rather than being focused on the commotion outside, I want us to be focused on, well, I need to get my nafs under control before I can start to think and interact, so on and so forth. The next thing I would say is that, the greatest strength that we have is our community. And from all of the things that I've seen in my time in Kenya, mashallah, you have a wonderful, nationwide community of brothers and sisters, of institutions, of schools, of mosques, of leaders. You even have qadi courts. I keep reminding my Kenyan brothers and sisters, you guys have it enshrined in your legal code that you have your own sharia solutions and halal food and you can bury according. That's what the ulama call Darul Islam. Even if you're a minority, you have more Darul Islam as a Kenyan Muslim than I have as an American Muslim. So you should celebrate that. And you should use that. And the Muslims, as all of my Somali and Kenyan brothers and sisters remind me, the first mosques were in Africa before they were in Arabia. So celebrate that great. You guys go back to the very beginning, to the Sahaba, radiallahu anhum. And I think that holding, to that community, to the jama'ah, holding to the community. Now, when I say about holding to the community, I want us to start to think about the wider community, not just the people that are like in my madhab or my mashrab. That's another problem that we have, is this sectarianism is going to tear us apart. And the fitna that we're talking about that's out there does not care what madhab and what mashrab I am, doesn't care what mosque I go to. It sees us all as one thing. So we might as well start acting like one thing so we can pull each other together. Are there differences amongst the community? Absolutely. I know Mawlid is a big issue, and I know, all of these things that people fight about, but just ask yourself, is this what the Prophet ﷺ wanted from us? Did he want us to be different and split and form different mosques to rival each other? Masjid al-Dirar is in the Quran. The Prophet ﷺ raised the mosque and burned it to the ground because it was a false, was not based on taqwa. So I know that there are different groups amongst the Kenyan Muslims. I'm using Kenya as an example because this is our medium. But It's the jama'ah, it's the group. إِنَّ هَذِهِ أُمَّتُكُمْ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً وَأَنَا رَبُّكُمْ فَاعْبُدُونَ. This ummah of yours is one ummah, and I am your Lord, so worship me. And in another verse, فَاتَّقُونَ, so have taqwa of me, be mindful of me. So while we're on our individual spiritual journeys, I want us to think about the community. Because if the community is dedicated, if the individuals of the community are dedicated to the spiritual journey, then that will increase the level of the community and the capacity of the community. And then the community then will have the resources to be able to solve its problems, to fulfill its needs, not looking out to somebody else to solve. We should solve our problems ourselves. We should fulfill our needs ourselves, rectify our education and the holes that we find in different sectors ourselves, and get the community working, get the community doing something for the wider community. If we do these type of things, we're not going to be so much concerned about all of this commotion, because it'll be like, we have a plan. We're working together. We're a jama'ah. We're working together. And inshallah, we're going to solve these problems. But when you're just sort of by yourself, when there's a leaf and the leaf is by itself and there's wind, the leaf goes like this in the wind and then it's gone. And if you're by yourself, the fitna will just take you like that. But when you hold together, you'll be stronger. So that's sort of how I think about these two main things. That's how I think about these problems for myself as well, because sometimes it's overwhelming. Sometimes you open the news, you're like, oh my God, it's like, is the qiyamah like tomorrow? Or is the qiyamah like this afternoon? I don't understand. How worse can it get? So I got to admit, it's overwhelming. But then I remember what I'm telling you. So I do tell myself the same thing I'm telling you. And I try my best to, I was like, you know what? If the qiyamah comes now, am I ready? And then I remember that's exactly what the Prophet ﷺ said to somebody. A man came to him and he said, Ya Rasulullah, mata sa'a, when is the hour? What did the Prophet ﷺ said? Reply, he said, Mata ماذا أعددت لها? What have you prepared for it? So if I die now, then that's my qiyamah, even if it's not the big qiyamah. So what am I ready? So when you start to think like that, then you're like, okay, kind of changes perspective. And then if you read history, you realize that there have been some pretty bad things in our own history, from the time of the Sahaba, the fitna between the Sahaba all the way down, that must have seemed more calamitous than the stuff that we're experiencing and seeing today. So therefore, there's always going to be fitna. There's always going to be negative stuff. The question is, are you ready? Are you ready today? Am I ready today? And that we're only going to be ready when we take that spiritual journey seriously and be like, you know what? I need to connect, and I need to say my prayers, and I need to do my dhikr, and I need to improve myself, because it could be my day, it could be today. My qiyamah could be today. Honestly, that's how I think about it.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much, Dr. Tarek. That was really, especially what you just concluded with, that is very thought-provoking, gives a lot of food for thought. Extremely scintillating discussion that we have had. Thank you so much for your time. I know you are very busy. Thank you for giving us this time. And inshallah, we pray that we can have future interactions, perhaps on more focused topics, so that our viewers can benefit. I thank you again.
I'm always happy to be in Kenya, physically in Kenya online, with Kenya online. I feel I'm part of the community, an extended part of the community. So alhamdulillah, pray for your success. Thank you for this gracious invitation. Allah Ta'ala give you great tawfiq and success in all your endeavors, for you, your listeners, and the station, inshallah.
Ameen wa iyyakum, and may I extend another invitation for you to come to Kenya. Please be our guest again one more time. Thank you so much. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum, Sidi.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.